For Turkey, the Islamic State, the Daesh, is not the number one threat. Militarily, definitely it is not a threat, in spite of the fact that it is having its operations along the Turkish borders on the Syrian territory. For Turkey, the traditional and even the present security threat still is the Kurdish issue. And it is especially very difficult because the Kurds, or at least some of the Kurdish militias and Peshmergas, both in Iraq and in Syria, are in alliance with the very same Western partners and the United States with whom Turkey is in alliance. In Syria, the Kurds have gained some kind of an autonomy along the Turkish borders, and in Syria there is the Iraqi Kurdish regional government with which in the course of several years Turkey have come into a very peaceful and very fruitful coexistence via several trade agreements and other contacts. But having a second Kurdish autonomy around the direct borders of Turkey, this I think is at the moment too much for the Turkish interest. On the other hand, since these Turkish groups and militias are fighting together with the Western forces, it also means that they are equipped with weapons, and Turkey has the threat and the feeling and the perception that these weapons may be turned against Turks or Turkish interests later. The other big threat in this whole situation for Turkey is, of course, the situation in Syria itself. A protracted civil war on the direct borders of any country is in itself a big security threat for the country. And also in Syria, with which Turkey has had several decades long, sometimes uneasy, sometimes friendly relations. And these friendly relations were especially characteristic of the personal relationship of Bashar al-Assad and Recep Tayyip Erdogan. When the Syrian crisis started, Erdogan gave advice to Assad how to accommodate the demonstrators, what to do, and warned him not to use military force against the population. Still, Assad went his way, and Erdogan changed his mind about Syria, and Turkey became one of the first countries that demanded a new Syrian government without Bashar al-Assad and a new Syria. And Bashar al-Assad, 5 years into the civil war, is still in his place. What's more, he is still supported by huge segments of the Syrian society, partly because the very diverse Syrian minorities see the Assad regime as the guarantor of their survival, and for the Sunni Muslim Syrian communities, because those who are fleeing but still remain in the country are fleeing to the part of the country where there is relative peace and quiet, and that part is controlled by Bashar al-Assad. So for Turkey, this is not only a strategic problem, but also a personal legitimacy problem, if you want to have it this way, for Recep Tayyip Erdogan. Therefore, the Islamic State comes only as a third element, because on the one hand there have been many rumors and criticism of Turkey that it is quietly cooperating with the Islamic State. On the other hand, however, there have been in Turkey a couple of terrorist attacks that were committed by the Islamic State, and Turkey has to react. So in reaction, Turkey has joined the international coalition against the Islamic State, but also Turkey has done a couple of attacks on Islamic State territories, but it seems that for Turkey still it is not the Islamic State which is the #1 enemy.